And I think it's still morning, so good morning, everyone. So again, my name's Mike Storey. I'm a client executive with Hylant. I started there in 2014, and Emily Kral is one of our health strategists. So we're going to do a little bit of a combination of some things to think about when you're looking to make some improvements and control costs, in your employee benefits. So just a little bit about Hylant, obviously, family-owned business on their fourth generation. Fifth is already in the pipeline. A huge credit for those of you that know the challenges of family-owned businesses to get to fourth and potentially fifth generation. I will tell you a couple things that have been really great when you see these younger generations come up. I mean, they have definitely put the right tools in place. Most of them are required to work somewhere else before they can work for the company, which is a really kind of a interesting, requirement, so they don't fall right into working for Hylant. But again, just a great testament to what they're doing as far as a family-owned business. I just thought I'd ask a couple questions, because as you can imagine, depending on the type of business, or probably more importantly, the size of business you are, you may find that there are some limitations to what you can do. So I was just curious, anyone in here in a self-funded arrangement? Or is everyone here fully insured from the medical benefits perspective? Looks like, right, no self-funded? Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because there is some additional ability to be a little bit more flexible and customized, and something you may potentially explore or.
Are you familiar with the law plan?
Yeah, so are you with, is it with Anthem or is it with United Healthcare? Paramount. Yeah, okay. And so some of those could be level funded programs, but yeah, so when I'm thinking self-funding, I'm actually thinking more, you're actually getting claims, you're paying claims themselves. So good, I appreciate that. I'll talk a little bit about it, but you'll find in our conversation, there's a reason why I want to know a little bit of the differences of how you're funded. Also, I do want to make this impactful for you all. So do you have any initial questions or things you want to make sure if we get around to that we can, any pressing issues? Or maybe more importantly, what are your biggest frustrations? I'm going to go on a limb and say cost is probably one of them. Any other real frustrations when you think about your benefits? And when I say benefits broadly, not just medical and dental vision, any other big frustrations for you all?
I would say shopping different places, because we've been with our vendor for the last 5 years, and it's very difficult to shop.
And when you say shopping, are you talking about the carriers or
I'm talking about our broker.
consultant? Okay.
Find platform, so have a platform where our employees can utilize a one-stop shop to see all the benefits, whether it's their pay stubs, their health insurance, benefits, everything in one spot.
Sure.
I've been shopping for that.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Not that I didn't want to put you all on the spot, but I always think it's good to get an idea if there's any real pressing issues, and hopefully you may find that we'll cover some of those.
Well, okay, I'll just speak up. Like, I would like to know what everyone else is doing. And,
Sure.
like, what's like a hot button in the market.
Mhm.
Yep. We're a smaller business. We have young and old. We have, the spectrum. So it's kind of like, well, what do my young people really want? I mean,
Sure.
we talk about it, we ask them, but they don't really. I'm just curious what
Yeah.
else are doing.
Yeah, good. I want to make sure. Yeah. And I appreciate sharing those because again, this is intended to be for your benefit. While we can certainly provide you with some broad information if there's some specific issues. And I think we can help make sure we weave those into our conversation a little bit as well. A little bit of a housekeeping at the end. We do have some resources for you. I'll talk a little bit more about them at the end, and some events coming up, things that are helpful for you all as businesses and organizations. So I thought what I'd start with, and this isn't intended to be a Hylant commercial. I really do intend this to be a little more broad in nature, but I thought it was good for you to get an idea at least of how we strategize or we approach our employer groups when we're looking at offering or recommending improvements, right? So one of the things we know for sure is these are the common challenges that every business is facing today, right? The cost of healthcare is continuing to rise every year. You're trying to engage, recruit, retain employees. And I will tell you, the other thing we're hearing more from employers is also them being understanding benefits. A lot of people are doing open enrollment meetings. You're probably getting limited attention span. And then all of these great benefits are probably sort of going in one ear and out the other. So there are certainly things we could talk about that I think help from that perspective. Obviously, the legal environment continues to change, which causes more stress and frustration on employers. And then the plan administration and delivery components as well. And so since you're all fully insured, my speculation is what you're doing right now is more of a reactive renewal process. Maybe not, but in most cases, we see that a lot of them are doing reactive renewals, right? Not a lot of pre-planning. You get a renewal and then you're trying to minimize the increase. And I always tell a fully insured employer, if you are trying to minimize your increase, you have 4 options. I would tell you, you probably don't like any of them, right? You eat the costs, you pass the costs on, you reduce the benefit, or you go to another carrier. All of those, I would say, most employers would say, I'm not a big fan, and that's what you find yourself doing. So part of what we want to do as from our perspective is develop a very strategic or proactive approach. And that allows you to see what's going on in the marketplace and allows you to determine, are there some options or things to do a little bit differently than to get into that 60-day window where now it's just, what can we do to minimize that increase, right? So this gives you a little bit of an idea of the areas of focus that we have as an agency. And again, not meant to be in a commercial, but just we realize that every organization has a different level of sense of urgency when it comes to things like, each of these areas, whether it be compliance or cost containment, member engagement. We'll certainly talk about health and well-being and so forth. You mentioned technology, right? So having a platform, these should all be parts of those kind of strategic, proactive planning conversations to make sure that you're aligning resources and putting forth the best solutions for your business and for your employees. I really feel the job of a consultant is to, what I say, balance the scale. When the costs of healthcare go up, you've got finance on one side of the scale, and really your employees sit on the other side of the scale. As the costs go up, what you really want is balance, right? And so how do you do that? I mean, anyone can come out and find ways to control costs, but does it create a lot of disruption and chaos for you as an employer? So what's really important is to really understand what is the message you're trying to convey in your benefits program, and how do you balance that? So that's where really the job of the consultant is, to bring different ideas to the table to give you the ability to determine the right solutions.
So I work at Trader and we are self-insured.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're with Hylant.
Yeah. So you're going to notice that things are probably a little bit more flexible in your environment. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And it could be a reason why some of you that are fully insured may decide to explore things like some different funding strategies that give you a little bit more flexibility. And really the reason for that is because data drives decisions. And again, if you're fully insured and if you're under 100, so this will give you a little bit of what the market's like, you're probably getting little to any data, right? You're not getting any claims reporting. If you're over 100, so the way the market is segmented, they segment you in 50 and under, 51 to 99, and 100 and up. If you're in the 50 and under space, you're probably getting nothing, just renewal information. You're not getting any data, details, what's driving claims cost. And a lot of your renewal is going to then be predicated on how the pool does because of how small you are. So the MIWA, for example, or if you're in another plan, that entire pool determines how your renewal is underwritten. If you're in the 51 to 99 space, we do get you can get a one-time annual report that gives you a little bit more detail as to what maybe high cost claims or some prescription drug costs. But what's important about this is that how do we recommend or decide on some improvements or some different strategies is what data we can get. Certainly for someone like Schrader that's self-funded, you're getting all your claims data, right? You're getting your information every month. You know exactly what's driving your claims costs. That gives someone like ourselves as a consultant the ability to say, well, what's driving claims and what can we do to, again, go back to the scale, improve costs, but not to do it at the detriment of the delivery of the benefit plan. So one of the things we can do for all employers, what I certainly encourage employers to do, is to get what's called a benchmark report. So a benchmark will give you an idea of how your claims compare to the market. I do believe a big place to learn from is certainly from the people you're hiring or considering to hire. It's good to have your ear to the ground. They'll give you some idea of are your benefits better or worse than maybe where they were, but you can have a benchmark report that you can actually take a look at how your benefits compare based on the size of employer you are, the geography you're in, and the industry. In fact, one of the things, and I'll share this with you, if you want to pass this, I couldn't get this electronically because I just got this today. One of the things that I would encourage, it's all the same, but I'm just going to pass it around so people take a look at it. This is just a summary, an executive summary that we could do for employers. It gives you just a broad look at, based on your size, your geography, and your location, what are the average benefits look like? So part of what would drive your decision would be, when I look at how our benefits stack up with other employers, is there a desire to make some improvements or changes based on what the rest of the market has to bear. It also gives you really good information to share back to your employees about what's out there in the marketplace, right? So that was all intended to be a little more of a broad understanding of how the market works, and helps me to understand a little bit of where you sit from being fully insured versus self-funded. So when I look at the fully insured market, some things that we're seeing in the marketplace today are transparency solutions. So some of you may have heard about some of these newer solutions. United Healthcare has Surest. There's also a solution called Garner, and I'll talk a little bit more about these, and Sidecar. So these solutions have been now built to give the member the ability to understand what the costs of procedures are before they utilize them. So the Surest application through United Healthcare is an all copay plan. There's no deductibles, there's no co-insurance. Everything has a copay. And when an employee needs to have anything done, they go in and say, I need a doctor's appointment, I need an MRI, I need a knee surgery. You'll actually see a copay that varies depending on where they go. So the technology behind this is to drive people to high quality providers with lower cost of procedures. An example I'll give is an MRI, right? No disrespect to the big facilities, but the ProMedicas and Mercies will charge significantly more for an MRI than if you went to a Toledo clinic or maybe a standalone MRI facility. So the way that works is an employee would see, I need an MRI. Well, the copay to go to the standalone may be $100. The copay to go to ProMedica could be $500. They can go wherever they want to go, but now there's a reason for them to potentially drive them to one facility or the other. So that helps keep costs down. Garner has a similar platform. It gives them access to transparency to know the cost of it. And then what you're doing is integrating an HRA in this. So it's are everybody familiar with what HRAs are? So health reimbursement accounts. So this is a scenario where you can buy a little bit of a higher out-of-pocket responsibility, but then reimburse the employee for utilizing the tools. And so in this case, again, they know to drive them to the proper facilities, and then you reimburse them accordingly, right? Sidecar is a new solution, also transparency. Employees will know what the costs of their services are. This is a non-network solution. There's no network. You can literally go anywhere you want in the marketplace. What they've done is determined what the average cash prices for every procedure. Believe it or not, every provider, every facility has a cash price. If you pay at the time of service, they'll accept that versus running it through, having it discounted, sending you your out-of-pocket responsibility. Again, it's driven off that benefit. And so, for example, let's just go back to the MRI. If the benefit amount for an MRI is $200, and you go to a facility that costs $300, you're gonna pay the additional $100 out of pocket. If you go to one that's $150, they'll actually give you a credit to use throughout the course of the year. So I want you to know these aren't commercials for these, but I wanted you to understand that these types of tools are out there. And so when you're thinking about preparing for your renewal, you might want to know, are these things worth looking at prior to your renewal? Because my guess is you're probably going to want to vet these, kick the tires, find out what it's like, what's the change like. Because if there's disruption, you don't want to squeeze that into a 60-day window, right? So funding strategies, I talked a little bit about. HRAs are a great way for you to buy up higher deductible amounts or out-of-pocket responsibilities, but offer a reimbursement. Unlike HSAs, where potentially you give them a contribution amount, everyone gets it, whether you use it or not. This is one where you only reimburse those that are actually using the benefit. Share plan is something that's through Medical Mutual. We talk a little bit about this. It's still a fully insured plan, but it allows you to buy some additional risk on top of the benefit. So what that means is, let's say you have a $5,000 deductible plan. You as an employer, let the plan, you can buy up a premium that says we'll pay, once the deductible's met, we'll pay a little bit of the out-of-pocket expense as well. So might be a little bit more complicated to explain, but it is a really nice fully insured platform that allows you some funding mechanisms to reduce the costs of your premiums. And then captives are, to me, a good first step for self-funding for smaller employers. I have employers with as little as 40 on the plan that have moved into self-funding through medical captives. Certainly from a technology perspective, I know in the back you mentioned, things like all-in-one systems, Ben admin systems. We certainly have a Ben admin system we utilize with all of our clients. For those, some of you may be familiar with Employee Navigator and have used that. It integrates with a lot of solutions, payroll systems, and it integrates reporting to the carriers. We've seen more concierge type of services where employees can have a one-stop shop to call. They know all their benefits. They can give them guidance and suggestions on how to best utilize their benefits and or who's the better provider, maybe help them with a claims issue. We do provide, employee or member advocacy, but there are certainly concierge services that are available. The last thing I'll talk about here is just, we're seeing more prevalence in worksite. So worksite are AFLAC type of benefits. So critical illness, accident, hospital indemnity. Because people have high deductibles, you may be interested in giving them access to a voluntary benefit like that, where they pay a little bit out of their paycheck and then they get paid, of course, if they have a sickness or an illness, things of that nature. We've seen more legal and ID theft solutions as well as pet insurance. Something I just saw today too, there is a platform that we've seen where you can actually give your employees access to going out and shopping for their homeowners insurance, car insurance. It doesn't cost the employer anything. You just give them access and they may be potentially able to find ways to save. So these are just some strategies, again, just to give you a broad look. What's really important for you is that ideally, if you're a 1/1 renewal, these are conversations and things you want to be talking about in February and March and in April, because you're probably going to want to think about these and what is the potential impact if we looked at making these types of changes for the organization. Any questions on those? And then if you self-fund, this is where the flexibility really comes into play. So certainly Schrader would understand that. I won't dive deep into it, but I think what's important here is now you have the ability, when I talk about unbundling, right now, everything is managed through your carrier, right? That's who you pay your premium to. That's who does your claims adjudication. That's your pharmacy. They have it all bundled under kind of one roof. So they control everything and they control how much you pay and how much the claims are. When you unbundle in a self-funded environment, you actually have the ability to break it all apart. So get your own third-party administrator who does their own claims adjudication. They work directly for you as an employer. You have a stop-loss coverage that'll cover your high-cost claims. You can have your own pharmacy contracts, believe it or not, you probably would understand, it's probably the most challenging environment for employers to understand is pharmacy contracts. So having the ability to we have a pharmacy consulting team that can give you your own pharmacy contract, make sure it's negotiated properly. Prescription spend is probably one of the most expensive, parts of your claims today. I want to make sure I'm giving you time. So we talk about transparent contracts. You can carve out programs. So much flexibility when you're in a self-funded environment that really gives you the ability, once you've got access to all of your information. I talked about medical captives. So a lot of flexibility. We take that data and then make decisions on the best way to, to customize solutions to the employer, and ultimately make sure that that's also still offering a competitive benefit. So that's kind of what-
Self-funded, like, 20 participants, is there like, we have 10, you're like, I'm just saying, what would you?
I would tell you what we typically will do is two things. We're going to want to know what your risk tolerance is as an employer. I told you.
Right.
Yeah, so I would tell you that I've had employers with as little as 40 or so enrolled on a plan. I would say if you're under that, it probably becomes a little bit more challenging to look at self-funding. But this is where medical captives are helpful, because what you're doing is you're actually sharing some risk with a pool of other
Yeah.
self-funded clients. For me, I'd say a minimum of 40 employees enrolled is worth at least exploring. So it does give you the ability to consider it. And it may be something you roadmap, maybe not for 26, but maybe you look at this and it should be potentially on your radar as you move into subsequent years. To me, the only real answer to ever really control costs and keep your benefits robust is to find some method of self-funding strategy that gives you a lot more access to data and flexibility to make changes. But good question.
Yeah, and I like my money going in is my, I'm just saying that,
Yeah, to
like,
give it,
goal and
right. I always I'll give you one little quick, and I'm gonna turn it over to Emily. One quick thing, what I think is important for people to understand about underwriting. The way they underwrite you in a fully insured environment is they're expecting to spend about 80 to 85 cents of your premium in claims. They've underwritten you knowing for every dollar you give them, they're spending 80 to 85 cents. If they spend 90 or 95 cents, right, you can imagine what that does to renewals. If they do the 80 to 85 cents, you're going to get a trend increase. That means you're going to get a 10 to 12% increase. Even though they got their profit and their administrative costs, they're going to ask you to pay another 10 to 12% in the next year. So what do you think happens when you dip into the 90 to 95 cents, or heaven forbid, they're paying 105 on the dollar in, right? That's when you see 20, 25, 30% increases. But here's the other part that probably you don't realize. What about when they're only paying 60 cents or 50 cents? You know what I hear people tell me? Well, we got a 3% increase, or somehow you got a flat. That tells me as a consultant, you guys are probably running really well, and it might be worth exploring the options. And again, it's risk versus reward, because there is a little bit of risk, but there is controlled risk. But I think it's important to understand how those underwriting rules work, to give you a little bit of an example of that. So I'll be available for some additional questions, then we'll wrap up. We do have a couple of resources we'll share with you as well, but I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Emily before I take up too much of her time. That's what happens when you give, a sales guy the ability to talk, right? He just keeps talking.
That's okay. All right, thanks, Mike. So if you take one thing away from today, I think this will be really helpful. And this is kind of the cornerstone of everything that we do at Hylant. A lot of what Mike just talked about and kind of where our two roles intersect, and that's that employee benefits equals employee well-being. So typically when we think of wellness programs or employee well-being, you think of those more like traditional softer things, I like to call them, right? Like the challenges, the lunch and learns, and those different kinds of things. But in reality, what we've discovered in our work at Hylant, and anyone really, I'm sure, in your all space and the wellness industry would tell you that every single benefit that you're offering your employees is impacting their well-being, whether it may be obvious or not. And so we've just created this helpful diagram to just kind of show you where those different things might fall in. Those are the 5 dimensions of well-being that we specifically like to talk about. If you've seen anything in the wellness space, you've seen that those might fluctuate a little bit depending on who you're talking to. But really, kind of what we've uncovered is employee benefits is the second largest spend or investment, depending on how you're looking at it, that an organization is going to have, right? And so at the end of the day, every choice that we're making, every dollar that we're spending towards employee benefits is going to be impacting employee well-being and how people are bringing them their whole self to work. And that's going to impact things like recruitment and retention, right? And employee satisfaction and all of that. So where my role comes in as the health strategist for Hylant is I'm working with Mike and his team and really incorporating well-being into that overall benefit strategy so that we can make sure that we are offering benefits that are supporting that whole person. And so this is kind of what I just said a little bit about my role, but this is what we do. And we really work to develop a customized strategy that's targeting all 5 of those dimensions. We want to ensure alignment between your overall benefit strategy and your well-being strategy. Wellness used to kind of be over here, siloed in its own lane, like I said, doing all the more fun stuff. And now we're really just seeing the 2 integrate a lot more. And a big part of that is using the data sources. I know Mike touched on data a little bit earlier. That's just a big driver for us at Hylant in general, is to use that data to really analyze your organization's needs and your population's needs as we're developing those strategies for you. And a big part of well-being in general is building a supportive culture of health at the work site. And I'll dig into that a little bit here in a couple further slides. And again, just identifying those metrics and using the data to also measure the success of the things that we are putting in place. So looking at the data that we get from the carriers for benefits and well-being at the end of the year to see what did we put in place and was it really effective. So my team of health strategists, there's 9 of us across our footprint, but every year we really spend a lot of time digging into what are the trends, is kind of a more popular word for them, but we refer to them as next practices. And that's really just, processes, ideas, and structures that can kind of change the way your organization functions. And so these are the next practices that we have uncovered for 2025. And I'm going to highlight specifically 3 of them here in a moment, but really the ones that we've seen, and some of these have continued year over year, I will say in the over 6 years that I've been in this role, but whole person well-being. So again, not to keep talking about those dimensions, but touching on all parts of the person, right? So not just that physical health and well-being that we're used to seeing, but also, mental health continues to be huge, especially following the pandemic and things like that. So that's a big one that we're seeing, and kind of tied into that, that comprehensive mental well-being strategy. So not just those traditional like 3 to 5 visit EAPs, right? Maybe we're adding in some additional on-site or virtual seminars or talks with an expert or different things like that, even expanding that EAP benefit or what's covered under the plan for mental health services. Again, the data-driven strategy, we've talked a lot about that, so I won't spend a ton of time there, but just utilizing every piece that's available to us to really uncover what are the areas that we need to target. Social drivers of health, so that formerly used to be called social determinants of health, so you may have heard either phrase thrown around there, but those are the things in everyday life, right? The way we work, the way we live, transportation, water, clean air, all of those things, and how those are impacting the person. And we're going to dig into that one just a little bit more. Women's health, that continues to be a really big one, but especially here in 25, we're seeing a lot of focus on things like fertility benefits, care for, perimenopause, menopause, specific cancers that are specific to women, and things like that. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that one as well. Family and caregiving support, kind of a sub of that one, and we're gonna dig into that a little bit more, but I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone here, but we definitely have a caregiving crisis in our country, and especially with that term, the sandwich generation. We have a lot of people that are caring for young children as well as their parents, and so we've just seen that be a really highly requested benefit from a lot of our clients. And then similar to what we talked about a little bit on the last slide, that impact of culture and work well-being. So the culture of the work site, the support that's available, which of course includes the benefits, is really impactful to the person's overall well-being. And so this is just, I wanted to just touch on this really quickly, how we kind of use data and analytics to drive impact. So Mike touched on this a bit, so I'm gonna kind of not spend too much time here, but we're gonna use the data that's available to use. That's everything from claims data to program utilization reports, and even things like employee surveys, or even just general feedback that maybe you hear during one-on-ones, evaluations, a manager, you know, heard it in passing at the water cooler, whatever that is. We like to be able to hear and gather as much of that data as we can. From there, the next important step is to really assess the resources that are already available and other things that maybe there's area for opportunity. Because a lot of times we find too that there may be things available to the employees or to you all even that we're maybe not highly utilizing and could be utilizing more. So rather than the first step being, well, let's find a solution to the problem that we maybe have to work into our budget, maybe there's already something there that we could be utilizing. And from there is where we're really going to build out that strategy. So a huge part of that is communications. I know someone mentioned it earlier. That's probably the biggest thing we hear from our clients is we offer all these great benefits and nobody knows that they're there. And our president actually refers to it as like a junk drawer of benefits. And that is a real problem that I can tell you every organization is facing. And so a big part of that is how can we craft a communication strategy around education and awareness for employees. And a lot of times that is a whole slew of things, right? Home mailers, the dreaded email, right? That we all get a lot of flyers posted, but also can be conversations at one-on-ones, and in group huddles, if that's a thing that takes place, just any way. Another one of our leaders likes to say 10 different times, 10 different ways, right? Before the person really remembers that it's there. And there's some other things we can do there, but won't touch too much on that today. And just revising benefits and also policies. Policies are huge. A lot of times, again, we might think the solution is to add something in, choose something new, but maybe it's just flexing what we already have and taking advantage of what there is available. Like we talked about in the beginning, cost is a thing for everyone. So how can we, you know, mold what we have to make the most use out of things for us? All right, so that, like I said, we're going to kind of dig in a little bit to 3 of those next practices. I wanted to talk a little bit about the family and caregiving support, why it matters. Again, probably not a surprise to those of us in this room, but caregiving responsibilities are increasing as our population ages and family dynamics shift. So a survey from AARP told us that over 53 million Americans are currently serving as family caregivers, and that can obviously look a lot of different ways, right? And that figure is expected to rise significantly by 2030, so in just 5 years here. And those responsibilities impact employees' health, well-being, and work-life balance. So making supportive policies in the workplace and having resources readily available can be really huge for talent retention. I can tell you, I'll use my own example. I have 2 small children, and my husband is a police officer, so I'm the default caregiver a lot of times because of his schedule. And if I didn't work for a place like Hylant that had a very flexible work schedule, I don't know that I'd be able to stay in the workplace, honestly, right now. So it's just something that I'm very thankful for is having that policy. And we have some additional resources available to us as well to help us find caregivers. I've actually used it. We have a vendor partner that we could use to help us find childcare in our area. So that's everything from daycares to sitters to nannies, what have you. So just even benefits like that can be really helpful, almost like a concierge service to help people navigate that field as well. And a big part of this for what can employers, so that's you all in the room, right? What can you do? The first step is just acknowledge and appreciating that the problem exists, right? A lot of times we just want to feel heard when we're struggling with something. So just taking a look, and maybe even you can guesstimate by looking at your employee population, like how many people might be struggling with something like this. And then again, leveraging things, there's certain days, right, of the year, there's a national day every day of the week, I feel like these days, but there's a National Family Day, National Family Caregiver Month, and you could really utilize those to communicate, again, maybe resources you already have, or if you know, or you can work with, a broker partner or a vendor partner, whomever, to highlight benefits or resources in your area that you could direct people to if this is something that they're struggling with. And then do some actionable support. So wellness programs that, address that family mental health or engage families, relationship building, all of those things, EAP, community resources. I know ProMedica is big. If anyone uses like a ProMedica health system, that's one of the questions actually they usually ask you in their little social determinants of health quiz before your annual is caregiving an issue. Is that preventing you from doing your job? So there are definitely community resources out there that you can direct people to. It doesn't have to be something that you're paying for. And again, those social drivers of health. So why this matters, the CDC has estimated that up to 80% of health outcomes are influenced by these social factors that people are dealing with. And so I kind of mentioned some of them, the more typical ones that might come to your mind, like clean air, food, shelter, education, and healthcare. Those are the things that help us survive. But now we've also identified that things like joy, meaning, purpose, relationships are the things that help us thrive. And all of those things are important to a person's well-being. And I know that can be difficult as an employer to be like, this is kind of a gray area. How much of this is really my responsibility to tackle or take on? And I don't want to do too much, right? I don't want to overstep my bounds. But again, just kind of knowing that those things may exist and knowing what resources are out there to direct people to can be really helpful. When it comes to social drivers of health, there are tons and tons of community resources, right? So it's just a matter of knowing what those are and kind of having that in your back pocket to direct if someone, if that comes across someone. And you can also do things like even looking at the county that your organization is in, or even if there's, a couple counties sometimes, right, where our people might live. That data is all free and on the internet, right? So you can look at how a county ranks with their social determinants of health and what people might be struggling with. And you can even use that data to help direct some of the maybe additional resources that you could offer with your organization. And also, importantly, I think, is just to train managers and leaders in like empathetic communication and active listening, just hearing what people say, and even kind of picking up maybe some between the lines things. Maybe you have someone, she's a single mother and she's late to work every day. Well, did her car break down? This time of year, are her kids sick every other day of the week? Maybe. So just kind of knowing what people might be dealing with and broaching those conversations really cautiously. And then lastly, that women's health, addressing women's health needs fosters a more inclusive and supportive workplace. And again, I kind of mentioned some of these, but things like reproductive health, breast health, fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, osteoporosis, menopause, and of course, specific cancers. There was a survey that said 89% of employed women agree that employer benefits positively influence overall workplace satisfaction, and that these kind of benefits would play a crucial role in their retention. And so again, just kind of raising awareness and cultivating support around those different things. Women's Health Month is coming up, of course, I thought that was in March, but that's International Women's Day. Never mind. And just kind of knowing those things, using those opportunities to maybe remind people to get their mammograms, right? I know we do that in October as well with Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but just using kind of those national days to bring awareness and education to people. And including any coverage. And a big one with this one, aside from, if there are any of those benefits out there, again, it's just, are there policies in place currently at the work site that we can maybe expand upon, add to, evolve a little bit to just make things more supportive around women's health?
The internet says May is women's health.
Okay, I was getting it confused. Thank you for doing that with International Women's Day, which is March 8th. So there's, like I said, too many of these days now. I can't keep them all straight. So we do have these resources that we just wanted to share because they tied in nicely to the things that we talked about today. I know you'll all be getting this sent out to you afterwards, so don't feel like you have to scan those QR codes or furiously write that down now. I think, Mike, you had a couple things that you wanted to highlight as well, right?
Yeah, so actually this benefit market outlook, I printed off a copy, but you'll obviously have a chance to scan that, so you have access to this. It'll give you a little bit of kind of what trends we're seeing. A couple things, surprise, surprise, I thought of a couple things I wanted to say. So somebody brought up recently to me, these are really intended to be benefits. When you think about especially medical, how many of your employees really see it as a benefit? What we've seen happen with these high deductible health plans is people are actually not using their benefit, right? They have so much out-of-pocket responsibility. The challenge for that, for you as an employer, but for them as a member is, we want them to use their medical benefits. And so you really need to start looking at what are some ways we can actually encourage and promote utilization. Because realistically, what's driving claims costs are critical and chronic conditions. People that have developed critical or chronic conditions, they're on high cost prescriptions because of potential medical conditions. Certainly there's the cancers and there's things that are unavoidable. But one of the reasons that that's happening is because people have stopped utilizing their medical benefits to some degree. I think of some employers that I know that have put in these high deductible health plans, and people go, well, I don't really have a benefit. I got to pay $4,000 before I even get a benefit. So a couple of things to think about. One, strongly encourage preventative campaigns, strongly encourage people utilizing the free benefit, annual physicals, all of their covered, 100% covered preventative care. Some of those transparency tools, no deductible, no co-insurance plans, are designed to get people to the doctor. If they don't have that high deductible anymore and they just have a copay, we want to get them to the doctor to utilize the benefit. Certainly the culture was a big thing. From an education perspective, the thing that I was thinking about that we've seen more of too, because thankfully for COVID, we've developed a lot of technology resources for education. We can do virtual meetings, record sessions. There's been a lot of interest by employers to want spouses to be educated. In many cases, it's not the spouse that's coming to these meetings, but it's the spouse that's doing all of the navigating of the benefits. So the ability for us or for you to have education developed that can be shared, whether you invite them to a virtual call or what we can do is record those sessions, you post them on a site within the employer's space so that not only can spouses or dependents get overviews of the benefits, but maybe new hires, things of that nature. So I just thought of a couple other things, at least we're seeing that are driving some change, and realistically employers are asking for, what can we do to enhance the education and engagement strategy for those members. So I wanted to make sure, felt like, did we answer the questions? I think for the most part we did, but also we want to open it up. So a couple things as we open it up. You can QR code this. So for the report that I passed around, I didn't have an electronic copy of it, but I will tell you, if any of you want this, I can do this for you. So you'll notice in this, like it says Great Lakes, 100 to 499 and manufacturing. If any of you wanted to reach out and ask for one specific to your size, your geography, and your industry, let me know and we'll get this run for you. You'll notice that if you go through this, it gives you a chance to kind of look at what is the benchmark benefits that employers, and it goes into everything from medical, dental, vision. I think there's even some, it'll show what some of the driving costs of, what's driving costs, short-term, maybe your disability policies, everything's in there. So that's another resource. The last thing, and I know Megan's if you haven't seen it, we are hosting an event on March 6th. It is intended to be a bit of a leadership HR event. We will have some speakers and breakout sessions. It'll be a little bit of a networking event. We think it'd be great if anybody wanted to attend, yourself, people within your organization. We'll make sure that Megan gets that out. The last thing for me is we are happy to share. We do webinars, seminar content, and it's intended to be useful, whether you're a client of ours or not. So we'll make sure that you guys get access to that information as well. That is, I think, our contact info as well, but I certainly want to know if there are any other questions. You guys have anything that pique any interest of things you want to hear a little bit more about.
Question for the group. If your employees are looking for kind of traditional, like not healthcare, but like out of the box benefits, what are you hearing from your employees is a number one priority? Also kind of the Karen's point where they're different ages and different things happening in their lives. But what's the number one thing outside of money? Like, you want time off. Time off. Which is hard, we are smaller, because it's not like we hire a lot of people to, you know, with customer service, because our many.
Yeah.
The reverence, things like that.
Yeah.
What
Regular time off, but you know what I'm saying, like that's what they really.
do they share, like time off for things specifically or just in general, like more days off of work?
I think each person has their specific.
Yeah.
Situation, you know, so,
Or a flexible schedule.
yeah,
You want more of a flexible schedule.
right,
The younger people for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
right.
And we completely understand and empathize. That isn't an option for every organization, right? Especially it just depends on the work that you're doing, right? Sometimes we have to be here at certain hours and certain things. 100%. So that can be a tough one to navigate. And you're right with them. I think you maybe mentioned at the beginning, the multi-generational workforce. That is a big struggle for a lot of folks because yeah, those younger generations just want a lot of different things than the older generations did. Flexible work continues to be huge. So I think even if there's any ways, right, that we can make things more flexible. And I know you kind of referenced the preventive care, and that's a big shift that we've seen a lot of groups do too, is focusing on that preventive care. But if you are going to do that, you also have to take into account, is there time off to go get that preventive visit, right? Because we all know, unfortunately, the doctor's open from 9 to 5, just like the days that we're working, and that can be a huge struggle. So that's where some of those other benefits though too, like the telehealth and things can come into play. But anytime we can work in those policies and even understanding, like that's why I asked that question, you know, is someone struggling with caregiving? Is someone sick and they need to go to the doctor and they feel like they can't take time off of work? Does their car need new brakes and they can't get to, you know, like all the things stack up, right? So just kind of getting a handle on that.
And David, one of those, each thing is happening all the time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Can a company with 50 employees?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I will say one of the things we're doing more and more with employers is employee surveys. So giving a chance to take a temperature of things that are on their mind, and certainly doing it in an environment that allows them autonomy to answer the questions, and you can aggregate the data.
Mhm.
So we do that a lot more with our employer groups that are just taking in, and it could be everything from questions specifically about benefits or just, you know, questions within the organization. And giving them the ability to provide that information without attaching their name to it
Mhm.
tends to give an employer, even, and what I've always said too, is even if you're getting information that you don't necessarily have a positive answer to, at least they know that you listen to them. I've had scenarios where the employees wanted a particular benefit. And when we did, the communication response on it, it was, well, I appreciate it. Here, we see it in a lot of interest, but let them explain to you why that's not an option, right?
Mhm.
So at least they feel like they've been heard, and it's a great way to, build a little bit of a better culture with your employees and get some potentially good feedback for things you do want to potentially change or improve in your benefit programs.
Yeah, surveys, focus groups, and again, I kind of mentioned it earlier, one-on-ones, I mean, whatever that looks like to get that feedback from employees. And it's also about how you ask the question, right? Because if we say, what are more benefits you want? They're always going to say, we want to be paid more, we want more time off, right? Like we can pretty much predict what that answer is going to be across the board, but it's asking some deeper questions and uncovering the whys behind that. I was just having this conversation with a client yesterday. She was like, I asked them, what they want to see, and they say, well, our dental sucks. And I'm like, well, what sucks about it? And nobody really has an answer, right? So you have to ask, sometimes you have to be a little crafty in how you're asking for that feedback, because there's usually a lot of layers to those answers. And once we know where that feedback is coming from, to Mike's point, that can help us say, well, we heard you say XYZ, we can maybe do this, but not this, right? So then we're still able to figure out what are the benefits that we can plug in there that are going to help with the problem. We maybe can't give you the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? Because we all have a budget at the end of the day, but if we can provide something, and to Mike's point, if they just know that they have a voice in the matter, a lot of times that can go a long way.
I think that's where culture has become a big component of what I would call the benefit plan, right? So, and culture can be things you're doing that don't really take a significant investment. It just needs to be some tweaks or changes in how the organization manages information, or how they, communicate or support the organization. It could be little things that they're doing just to provide a little bit of a different environment within the organization.
So the one thing I noticed, is they want more personal growth opportunities. We have a large group of machinists and technology, right? There's always something new coming out with these types of environments. So, put them through this apprenticeship program, but then once they have their journeyman card, it kind of stops there, right? So they need more, right?
Mhm.
They need more, and it's all ages.
Right.
It's not just the young people, it's the 40-year-olds who have been doing this now for 20 years, and they know there's more. I think COVID kind of shut a lot of things down, and there's great tools out there. I know LinkedIn has some great tools too for educational purposes, but not everybody has the motivation and the energy and the discipline to do it themselves.
Mhm.
And they need that push from their employer.
Mhm.
And I think at the end of the day, it does help promote a better culture, and culture is what I'm seeing huge right now.
Mhm.
We're struggling with it a bit. And that's kind of like the newer role I kind of moved into, is kind of more focused on that. And like every single person has an individual set of needs, and you can't just blanket things.
Mhm.
With these smaller businesses, it doesn't work.
It's interesting, I was at an HR conference, and the speaker was talking about, he tasked all of his managers to daily go around and talk to each of his employees. And this was in an environment that right, everyone's probably getting paid just over minimum wage. They could work anywhere. And of course, he said, I had some that were religious, did it all the time. I had some that probably did a little, and some that didn't. The turnover ratio was dramatically different just by taking the energy to go around and talk to their employees. And so you think about, there's no cost to that. The other thing I've seen is, not so much now, but when everyone was really struggling for bodies, I think that's quelled a little bit in recent years, or at least recent months, was doing almost like what they call stay interviews or rehiring. So going around and talking to employees and finding a little bit about their career path, because they were neglecting the fact that maybe somebody was working in a frontline position, but they're getting their education to be an accountant, right? And they had no idea that one day they come in and say, oh, I want to let you know I'm going to become, work. And they had no idea that they could have career path them to stay within the organization. So it's definitely a lot of different things that employers are having to do to be a bit creative to engage their employees.
I think that the older generations don't quite understand that concept, right? Because we were raised to be seen, not heard,
Mhm.
and that caused conflict,
Right,
and with the younger generation. So,
Right.
yeah.
And I would say too, with the growth thing, I think too, just thinking of like non-traditional ways that maybe your organization could support that. So like, I think about in Toledo, we have so many great professional organizations that you could be a part of. And so if that's something that's an option for your organization to like sponsor people to go through some of those that have a cost. I know at Hylant, every year we send 2 people through Leadership Toledo. I just completed that in last year's cohort and was beyond grateful for the experience. I learned about so many different things in this area, and it allowed me to connect with 40 other professionals in the area. And so just such a great, growth and learning opportunity. So just kind of being aware too of things like that may be available to direct people to. Those are things that I didn't even know about until I went through it. So just knowing that those are there and can kind of direct people who do have that hunger for those opportunities, being able to kind of provide those as well.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to talk. Hopefully, we hope you found at least a couple things you could maybe take away from it. Again, you'll get your info, our contact info is available. If there's anything we can do to be of help to you all in the future, let us know. But we all wish you well with your organizations and your benefit programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since I got the last word, I'm gonna add my 2 cents too.
Yeah.
I know as you talk about communication, as an employee, and where I'm an employee of a large organization, like I would love my HR department just to take 1 hour with me one time a year, ask me whatever you want, but kind of get to know me a little bit and say, here, these benefits, you need to, I don't know if you know you have, but you should take advantage of them. You know, like I have kids a certain age, so like I know about the tuition benefit, but like had I not, it's just like get to know me a little bit and tailor it. Because you can send me emails, but I also get a lot of apologies. I mean, we just get a ton of emails, so that's what I would love as an employee. And also, I think mental, we talked about wellness, but like mental health, I think that's a benefit, like with mental health or access to it, or even coaching, that you probably don't know you want or need until you actually have it. And then you're like, wow, this is great. I can't go without it. So I know on the mental health side, I think the hardest challenge is trying to find someone. That's like the biggest obstacle. Like, how do I find someone and then schedule the appointment? So like, as an employee, I think that would be a great benefit too, even if there was people that came to the office or you gave out time to do something like that or.
Yeah,
Well-
we looked at Chaplin. They're very expensive, but they'll go to like every location and talk to your employees and it takes a long time to build a relationship, but then. Once it gets going, I'd love it. I haven't got it yet, but,
What about mentorship? I mean, does that kind of fall in that same kind of concept as like a mental health counselor almost? I feel like for me, I've had all these mentors, these great mentors that kind of played that role and didn't even probably know it, right?
But then a good mentoring program is really a great benefit. The problem with mentoring is no one teaches you how to be a mentor. Like no one told me how to be a mentor. Yeah. So, okay, well, yeah, thank you. Sorry, thank you for coming.
That's all right.
We'll send this